아이고야. 안녕하세요. 동탄으로 왔습니다. 오늘 밖에 날씨가 너무 좋아요. 외출하기 딱 좋은 날씨인 것 같은데 평일이고 또 코로나 때문에 현재 시간이 16시 57분입니다. 곧 5시죠. 5시 현재 기준으로 1595명 확진자가 나왔습니다. 지금 제가 원래 4월달에 유럽 여행이 결정돼 있었는데 크로아티아에 갔다가 스위스를 갔다가 프랑스를 가는 크로아티아, 파리, 스위스 이렇게 가는 일정인데 지금 유럽이 이제 시작이죠. 이탈리아를 중심으로 크로아티아에도 확진자가 한 명이 나왔고요. 지금 대한민국 우리나라를 격리하는 나라들도 많이 늘어났고 검사가 길어지는 나라가 늘어났어요. 큰일입니다 지금. 오늘 유럽 거기 하는 업체 전화해서 새로 발표된 취소 규정이나 그런 게 있냐고 물어봤더니 원래 이번 주 금요일까지가 취소 기한이었거든요. 총 위약금이 90만 원인데 다음 주 화요일로 바뀌었답니다. 90만 원으로 하는 게. 만약에 크로아티아나 다른 항공사가 취소가 되면은 위약금을 조금만 물 텐데 미쳐버리겠습니다 지금. 여행 가는 저는 그나마 다행이죠. 결혼식을 앞두신 분들이 가장 큰 고민이죠. 다들 잘 이겨냈으면 좋겠습니다. 지금 이 코로나 사태를. 일단 저는 운동을 하겠습니다. 이 이틀간은 운동을 잘 안 했어요. 팔굽혀펴기 10개 정도만 했죠. 그리고 서울집에서 잠을 자면은 불편해서 잠을 잘 못 자요. 목도 너무 아프고. 그래서 오늘 원래 되게 빡시게 운동을 하려고 했는데 우선은 스트레칭을 위주로 좀 많이 하고 팔굽혀펴기 손목이 또 아파가지고 팔굽혀펴기는 일단 이거를 써서 한번 해볼게요. 일단은 최대한 스트레칭을 많이 하고 나서 운동하는 걸로 할게요. 스쿼트도 하긴 해야 되는데 큰일 났네. 이제 이틀 동안 집에서 놀고 먹고만 해가지고 일단은 원래 TV를 뉴스를 틀어놓으려고 했는데 제가 영어 공부도 좀 해야 되니까 YTN CNN을 틀어놓도록 하겠습니다.
All around the world, you are watching CNN Newsroom and I'm Rosemary Church. Just ahead, a coronavirus case in the US may be the first of its kind with no known link to travel abroad or contact with someone else infected. We will ask an expert what this could mean. New outbreak clusters across the globe are causing alarm and emergency measures in the Middle East with school cancellations and impacts to religious rituals. With just days to go until a critical primary election, 4 Democratic candidates made their case for why they should be the next US president. Donald Trump is writing his prescription to stop the spread of the novel coronavirus in the United States, and the effort will be led by Vice President Mike Pence. Mr. Trump is trying to reassure Americans that the risk from the virus is very low, but he insists his administration is working with Congress on funding and is prepared. Meanwhile, sources say privately the president is worried the falling stock market will hurt his chance for re-election.
We're very, very ready for this, for anything, whether it's going to be a breakout of larger proportions or whether or not we're at that very low level. We were asking for $2.5 billion, and we think that's a lot. But the Democrats and I I guess Senator Schumer wants us to have much more than that. And normally in life I say, we'll take it. We'll take it. If they want to give more, we'll do more. We're going to spend whatever's appropriate. Hopefully we're not going to have to spend so much because we really think we've done a great job in keeping it down to a minimum.
Meanwhile, another new dangerous development with the Centers for Disease Control saying a patient in Sacramento could be the first US case of what's called community spread. CNN's chief medical correspondent, Dr. Sanjay Gupta, explains what that means and why it's a concern.
It's unclear how this person got coronavirus. Maybe they did get exposed to someone who was infected. We're not sure exactly how this happened, but it could represent the first example of community transmission. And that's something that we've been talking about for some time. This idea that you haven't traveled there, you haven't come in contact with a known infected person, and yet you still have the coronavirus, that's an indication that the virus is now here and starting to spread within communities. Again, the CDC is still going to chase this down. It's unclear if that patient represents this first evidence of community spread, but the president has been saying for some time, look, it's not inevitable that this will happen. Maybe we don't have any community spread at all, and which has been at odds with what we're hearing from the CDC, who has been saying it's not a question of if community spread will happen, it's a question of when it will happen. So that's why so much attention is going to be paid to that one patient. We'll certainly give you details as we get them. I also want you to listen closely to an exchange I had with the president yesterday at this news conference. Take a listen.
Flu has a fatality ratio of about 0.1%.
Correct.
This has a fatality ratio somewhere between 2 and 3%. Given that,
We don't know exactly.
the numbers so far,
And the flu is higher than that. The flu is much higher than that.
there's more people who get the flu, but this is spreading, and it's going to spread maybe within communities. That's
It may.
his expectation. Does that worry you? Because that seems to be what worries the
No,
American
because we're ready for it.
Now, the reason we were talking about this is because the president has been comparing this new coronavirus to the flu virus. And in some ways, understandably so. They both, the flu virus and coronavirus, very transmissible.
지금 피부도 완전 다 뒤집어져가지고
pretty easily. But when you're looking at a
고민이
potential
이만저만이
outbreak,
아닙니다.
potential
지금 다
pandemic,
짜야 돼요. 지금
you do want to
특히
look
목
at
부분에 심해졌어요.
but also how lethal something is.
두드러기 약을 안 먹은
The
게
lethality or
요인이
the
될까요?
fatality ratio is 0.1%.
제가 한 이틀 안 먹었거든요.
Some people who get the flu.
그래서 오늘 방금 여기 동탕 하나 먹었어요.
It's closer to
혹시나
2%
싶어서.
or even a little bit higher than
아,
that.
약 안
So that's
먹으려는데
20 times higher. If this coronavirus starts to spread like the flu does and it's the fatality ratio is significantly higher, you can see the problem there. And that's why the public health community is so focused on this. They got to be ready. As they say, they're planning for a pandemic, hoping it doesn't happen, but planning nonetheless. Back to you.
Thanks for that. And Sanjaya Senanayake is an infectious diseases specialist with us, joining us from the Australian National University, and he comes to us via Skype from Canberra. Thank you so much for being with us from my old university. Good to chat with you. So let's start by talking about this new case in Sacramento, California. This person has no history of traveling abroad, and as far as we know, no contact with anyone who is infected. Clearly, they must have at some point. Yet he or she is now infected with the coronavirus. What does that signal to you?
Hi, Rosemary. It's lovely to be here. It is of concern. Now, when the US and Australia have been having cases that have been identified that have a clear link to China, we've been comforted in that there's unlikely to have been any local transmission. We found the person, we've isolated them and isolated their contacts. But in this case, this person has caught it from someone without leaving the US. So there is clearly local transmission. What is really important is to find how this person got infected. Hopefully there's only been one chain of infection, so it's someone close to them who's been infected, who went to a country which has coronavirus in it. If not, if they can't trace it back to a particular origin within the US, then it suggests there might be a lot of cases going round.
And that is a signal to you, perhaps, that we could be very close to a pandemic? Do you feel that that's a possibility?
Rosemary, I think we are very close to a pandemic, but in practical terms, I don't know if it should make a difference. There's this wonderful catchphrase I saw on social media, which I can't claim for my own, unfortunately, which is prepare, not declare. So I think it is really important, even if a pandemic isn't declared this week or next month, that all nations, Australia, the US, review their pandemic planning and make sure it is in place in case this tips over into a pandemic.
Right, yes, some very good advice there. And of course, we know US President Donald Trump has been trying to downplay the risk of an outbreak across the United States, despite what he's been told by his very own experts. A number of critics think that's to preserve the economy. Whatever the reason, how prepared do you think the United States is to deal with an outbreak? And what does it need to be doing right now, along with all of the other countries that are involved here?
Look, I don't envy the role of any world leader in this type of situation because it's important to ensure that there's no sense of panic, but also provide accurate information.
와, 왜 이렇게 힘들지?
What was your question again, Rosemary? I lost my thought there.
Well, just giving us an idea of how prepared you think the United States is and what it should be doing right now, as well as these other countries.
So I think it is very important to activate or look at their pandemic plan. Australia has just activated their pandemic plan. What's a pandemic plan? Well, we've had a number of close pandemics or outbreaks that have been close to pandemics like SARS, Ebola, swine flu. Giving us an opportunity to prepare for the eventuality of a very dangerous infection going around the world. So I think it is reviewing that plan and making sure the resources are in place if we have sustained local transmission in our countries.
Right, now overall we know the mortality rate appears to be around the 2% mark, but in Iran we're seeing it as high as 14%. What do you think is behind that? Perhaps unreliable numbers or something else?
Yes, you're quite correct. So far from confirmed cases, we've been seeing a case fatality rate of 2%. Now, Rosemary, it is actually possible that the true case fatality rate is much lower than that, because there may well be a number of cases who have been very mild or not even having symptoms, who've never been tested, who have COVID-19. So the actual case fatality rate may be lower. But going back to your other point, why does Iran have such a high case fatality rate? I suspect that their numbers aren't correct. There probably are a lot more cases of coronavirus in Iran that haven't been identified.
Right, very interesting. Sanjaya Senanayake, thank you so much for joining us from the Australian National University. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Well, the virus has now spread from China to every continent except Antarctica. And for the first time on Wednesday, there were more new cases reported outside mainland China than inside. China tallied 433 new infections, while the World Health Organization counted nearly 460 everywhere else. Well, in South Korea, almost 1,600 people are now infected. The majority are in the city of Daegu. Earlier, CNN spoke with an American teacher living there, and she described what life is like in the heart of the country's outbreak.
There's just fewer people out on the streets. Everyone's, for the most part, taking the self-quarantine advice very seriously. I went out myself today because I had to pay a bill at the bank, but I was wearing gloves. Everyone's wearing masks. It's just life is normal.
와, 지금 CNN의 대구에서 살고 있는 미국인이 지금 유튜브야 이거 뭐야? 인터뷰한 거야? 진짜 우리나라는 진짜 이 기회를 잘 넘겨야 됩니다. 진짜 세계적으로 지금 엄청 유명해지고 있는데 진짜 기회를 잘 살려야 돼요. 대구 시민 여러분들, 진짜 우리나라 시민 여러분들 진짜 잘 사재기 이런 거 안 하셔도 되는 거 아시잖아요, 그죠? 우리는 그런 거 안 하잖아요. 사재기 같은 거 안 하잖아요.
Well, so far the virus
서로
has
서로
infected
힘내서
20 South
잘
Korean
이겨내자고.
service members and 1 American soldier stationed in the country. Now, the US and South Korea have decided to postpone joint military exercises until further notice. Officials say they are prioritizing the health and safety of their personnel. So let's go live now to Seoul and to our Paula Hancock. So Paula, of course, this indicates just how seriously South Korea is taking the outbreak across the country. Talk to us about the latest on this.
Yeah, Rosemary, I have an update on figures for you. Now we know that 25 South Korean military personnel have been confirmed as having the virus. Still one within
오후
the
발표가
US
5시인가?
in Korea, but from the South Korean side, it is across the board. It is in every unit, so to speak. It is in the Navy, in the Army, in the Marine Corps, and also in the Air Force. So certainly there is a great deal of
손목이
concern.
아프니까
It was
이거 아령
stressed
드는 게
today by the fact
나을 것
that
같은데
the
손목
South
아플
Korean
때.
side say that they are the ones that raised
한번
this
해볼게요.
with the US forces.
손목에
Korea,
무리가
they are
가나
the
안
ones
가나?
that wanted to postpone these military drills. Many of these soldiers from the South Korean side would be living in fairly close quarters. They would be in barracks and they would be living in working in close quarters as well. So certainly they are doing everything they can to try and contain this virus. So there has been one case within the US military as well, a 23-year-old male who was from a base close to Daegu, about 20 kilometers from Daegu. This is the city in the southeast of the
이게
country.
낫네.
Really ground zero.
손목 아플
for the
때는
coronavirus.
팔굽혀펴기 되게 이게 나은 것 같아요. 확실히 여기에 주로 힘이 들어가니까
He had traveled to a base
팔굽혀펴기는 조금 쉬어야 될 것 같아요.
itself, and so he's now
손목이
in Camp Humphreys, the
살짝
headquarters.
시립니다,
And
시려요.
what the military is trying to do
원래
is
이
to trace his steps, to do the contact
푸시업
tracing,
바를
to
이용해야
see
되는데
if
그냥
he can
맨바닥에 하다
contain
보니까
any kind of outbreak within the military itself. And we also know from the State Department that they have changed their alert level for traveling to South Korea. They have now raised it to level 3, which means that they are saying to Americans, you should reconsider travel to South Korea. Rosemary?
All right, Paula Hancock's bringing us the very latest there from Seoul in South Korea. Many thanks. Well, cases of the coronavirus are rising throughout the Middle East. Iran, Iraq, Pakistan, Lebanon and Israel have reported cases. In an effort to slow the spread of the virus, Pakistan and Iraq are closing schools, and Saudi Arabia is keeping religious pilgrims from entering the kingdom. CNN's Jemana Karachi joins me now from Istanbul, Turkey. And Jemana, we talk about Iran, of course, because it's seen as the epicenter of this outbreak in the Middle East. Let's start there and look at the problem across that part of the world.
Well, you know, Rosemary, the thing is, we don't know at this point how widespread the disease really is in Iran. The scale of the outbreak, there are concerns about how transparent officials are being about this, because if you look at the figures, they just don't make sense. You've got 139 confirmed cases in Iran, 19 deaths. That's basically looking at a mortality rate of around 13 to 14%. That is significantly higher than the mortality rates in other countries, the global average, significantly higher than that. So there are lots of questions about why.
내일부터 출근입니다. 휴가 끝났어요. 아이고야.
Considering the situation when it comes to the healthcare infrastructure in the country that has been impacted by U.S. sanctions. Is there an issue with how they're reporting these cases? Are people not going to hospitals when they suspect that
운동이
they may
끝나면은
have
청소기
the
돌리고
symptoms of the coronavirus?
세탁기
Or we're looking
돌리고.
at a case basically here where the Iranian regime is
이불 빨래도 해야
basically
되는데.
trying to downplay the severity of the situation. Certainly, this is the kind of message that you get when you hear officials there speaking. We heard the
이불
Iranian
빨래는 10시
President
안에
Hassan
끝날 것 같은데.
Rouhani basically reassuring people yesterday, telling them that the situation is under control, telling them not to listen to
얼마나
rumors,
했죠?
slamming the
19분?
United States, he says, for spreading fear and panic amongst the population. But they are taking some measures. One really extraordinary measure we've heard from authorities there is that they are not going to be holding Friday prayers in cities where there has been an outbreak. But at the same time, they're saying at this point that they're not considering and they've not made a decision to quarantine any cities. This is really raising a lot of concerns amongst countries in this region, countries bordering Iran, putting pressure on them to basically put in place their own preventative measures and measures to try and contain the spread and the outbreak, Rosemary.
All right, Jemana Karache bringing us the very latest from her vantage point there in Istanbul, Turkey. Many thanks. We'll take a short break here. Still to come, days of sectarian violence leave a grim scene in New Delhi. The rising toll it's taking. That's it.
아이고, 잠깐 YTN으로 넘어갔다 오겠습니다.
And now, a moment of wonder from Great Big Store.
필요한 대응을 하고 있습니다.
그러나 확진 판정을 받고도 집에 머무는 환자는 물론 주변
아직 발표 안 났나 봐요.
만들어봤습니다. 지뢰는
어저께 보면 17시 난 것 같았는데 아닌가? 16시였나?
확보했지만 이마저도 턱없이 모자란 실정입니다. 정세균 국무총리는 확진자가 입원도 못하는 사태에 대해
MBC 뉴스 임경아입니다. 세계보건기구 WHO 사무총장이
않으면 취소하고 온라인이나 이런 식으로
신호스톰 프라임. 요즘에 애들 장난감 되게 멋있게 나오는 것 같아요. 와, 각 클래스도 잘 나와요. 힐러, 방금 힐러 있습니다, 힐러. 뭐지? 사람이 안에 타 있는 건가? 스킬 쓸 때 스킬에 대한 설명 나오네요. 멍청한. 지금 열심히 막고 있습니다. 이거 볼 때 아니죠.
시급한 중환 환자부터 치료를 잘 받을 수 있게 하는
아직 발표 안 났나 봐요. 1995년 똑같네요.
무슨 문제가 없는지는
다시 CMM으로 가겠습니다. 스쿼트 20개 하나 더 하고 이거 10개만 더 하고 복근 할까? 지금 뱃살 장난 아닙니다 지금. 스쿼트 먼저 합시다. 아이고야. 아유 힘들어. 허리 아파. 허리 아파.
sectarian battles have reduced parts of New Delhi to smoked out rubble. At least 33 people have been killed in protests that exploded into violence Sunday. Demonstrations began in December over a law that fast-tracks Indian citizenship for refugees from neighbouring countries, but only for non-Muslims. We turn to Sam Kiley now, who joins us live from New Delhi. So Sam, what's the latest on this and what's the Indian government planning to do about it?
등 아파. 귀등이 아프지?
Well, India's government has moved very slowly to respond, but it has now flooded this area of areas of northeastern Delhi with police, bringing down for now the level of violence. But the level of violence was the highest that had been seen in many, many years here in the capital. This is what it looked like on the ground, Rosemary. Rioters desecrate the minaret of a Delhi mosque with a flag bearing the simian image of Hanuman, the Hindu god of power. It's calculated to insult and inflame.
The mosque itself torched on the third day of communal violence that killed dozens and injured many more.
This is what remains of Khurshid's rickshaw. I asked Kashir, how will you make a living now? He said, when there is nothing left, how will we earn? We will steal and then drink poison and die. He told me that a mob attacked the mosque in this mostly Hindu neighbourhood 24 hours earlier. They moved on to smash and burn Muslim homes around it.
This has been not only burned, but the toilet has been smashed. The shower rendered useless. This is what communal violence really looks like.
Violence erupted after a powerful Hindu politician from the ruling BJP party published a video demanding that anti-government protests be stopped. He warned that if the police did not stop the demonstrations, we will take to the streets. Soon, rival mobs clashed in riots that spread across the northeast of Delhi. Victims from both communities ended up side by side in the local morgue. Yasmin waits for the release of her brother-in-law's body. She said, people came from behind and were shouting, Jai Shri Ram, Hail Lord Ram. They took Mehtap away. Then we got an anonymous call that Mehtap had been set on fire. Hamir Singh, a Hindu, lost his nephew.
Do you think that the policies of Mr. Modi have contributed to this?
That is true. If they didn't make this law, that would not have happened. But the law is right from his perspective. He is our Prime Minister, and people shouldn't riot like this, he said. The Indian PM has appealed for calm, but scores have died in riots and protests this year across India, and the bloodletting looks far from over. Now, the National Security Advisor has been out on the streets, has indeed the Chief Minister of Delhi, who's not part of the ruling BJP party. He has called for control of the police to be placed under the city authorities, and even that the military, the armed forces, should be deployed on the ground. That was when the violence was at its height, Rosemary. It has dialed down, but the issue now
여기까지 하겠습니다, 오늘.
scars and resentments from this intercommunal violence, from this